Good day, everyone. I rewatched Cinema Paradiso last night again, and it made me think of Italo Calvino and one of his last books, Mr. Palomar. And these are basically the meditations of a man and on life. And the last sentence of it, the last paragraph actually, of the story, is when he's contemplating the end, or he imagines himself being dead. And of course, he knows that he's not dead, but he contemplates, what if I am dead, and does the world still go without me? Of course, the answer is yes, it goes on without you. And the idea of eternity, how could you make a moment last forever, or something that comes close to eternity in some ways? And I'll read you the last paragraph of this wonderful book by Calvino. He says, if time has to end, it can be described instant by instant, Mr. Palomar thinks. And each instant, when described, expands so that in the end can no longer be seen. He decides that he will set himself to describing every instant of his life, and until he has described them all, he will no longer think of being dead. At that moment, he dies. Now, if you could substitute the word relationship for time, if the relationship has to end, it can be described instant by instant, and each instant, when described, expands so that its end can no longer be seen. And that made me think of one of my favorite novellas, La Invention de Morel, The Invention of Morel, by Adolfo Bioy Casares. Now, this is not the whole book, but the novella is contained in this collection of his stories. In this story, you have an inventor, a man named Morel, who has this projector. It's a marvelous scientific invention that the projector can capture not just a moment in time, but it could be days or years of it, and project it. If you can imagine that you think about moments in your life that were important to you, the happiest in your life, and the people that were part of that, and it was captured by this projector, by this film, and you visit an island where the story is set, and you can go back to it, and you see yourself. The mornings, the days, the evenings, everything is captured exactly as it was. And it goes on forever, as long as the projector has power. You will die. Everyone you knew will pass away. But you will live, and that moment will live forever, and people will see it. It's a marvelous invention when you think about it. But of course, like every marvelous invention, there's always maybe a price to pay. And that book is again The Invention of Morel by Adolfo Bioy Casares, a good friend of Borges and fellow Argentinian. Now, before he wrote this book in the mid-19th century, I think Hans Christian Andersen had caught with the idea, had a maybe similar projection of how to make a moment last, how the mind deals with adversity or difficulties or moments of happiness. How do you want to keep it forever? A little short story, The Little Match Girl. And you have this little girl, child, New Year's Eve, trying to sell these matches. She's lost her shoes, her feet are bare, her head is bare, and it's freezing cold. She can't go home because she hasn't sold any matches, and her father will beat her. She sits between two homes and looks into the window of the comfortable family living there. So she decides to light one match. Again, she hasn't sold any, and she can't go home. When she lights one of the matches, she imagines this iron stove and the warmth of it heating her little body. And it extinguishes. She lights another one, and she sees a beautiful Christmas tree before her. All the lights. And when it extinguishes, she sees the stars above. She lights another match, and she sees this table with food. I think it's roasted goose and fruits and such. And at one point the goose gets from the table and runs towards her for her to eat. And it extinguishes, and all she sees is a bare wall. She lights another match and sees the only person that ever loved her, her grandmother, who is dead. But her grandmother's there, holding her, loving her. The next day, New Year's Day, her lifeless body is found between these two homes. Her knees are up and she has her arms around herself. Not all the latches have been lit. She has a smile on her face. The little match girl. If I'm correct, Andersen wrote that story, I think, in 1845. About 2 years earlier, or 3, in the U.S., a writer was born. His name was Ambrose Bierce. Bierce was deeply affected by his experience in the Civil War when he fought on the Union side. He wrote remarkable short stories about the war. His most famous is an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, where you have a Confederate sympathizer is about to be executed by the Union soldiers. He's on a bridge, and the bridge is overlooking a stream. And he has the rope around his neck. He looks down into the water and sees some driftwood and such. The order is given. His body drops, but the rope snaps, and he drops into the water. Bullets begin to be fired at him by the soldiers, and they miss. He swims towards the bank of the river, and the pursuit begins. Now, this is near his home, so he knows that if he makes it, after a certain point, he'll be in safe territory. So much of the day goes by into the evening as he's trying to evade the soldiers. And he sees his home in the distance. It's a plantation home. And he runs towards it. Now he's quite thirsty by this point. He feels his tongue is swollen, his eyes are congested. He just feels extremely lethargic. And in the distance, you see a flurry of a dress and an arm of a face, and it's his wife. She sees him and she walks down the stairs of their home, outside stairs, and he sees her and he runs towards her. And it's at that point he feels a sharp blow to the back of his neck. You see the white light. The next image we see is of him hanging from that bridge. His neck has been broken by the rope. So for a few seconds, he was able to expand those seconds, instant by instant, into something that lasted much longer than he actually had left on this earth. It made me think about these stories, this movie, Cinema Paradiso, a film that has been with me for a long time, as have these stories. And I often think of Calvino's words when I read Mr. Palomar, which would have been sometime in the 1990s, about how you can extend a moment in time to last forever if you focus on that one instant and just think about it and study it. And it's true. The end doesn't have to come. It will come in the end, of course, obviously, but it's those grains of sand. If you could have, you think about Joyce, what he said, I think, in the Portrait of the Artist, of what eternity was like, where you have this mountain of sand and a bird comes and takes one grain and travels to the end of the universe and then comes back. A very arresting form of definition of eternity, or how to describe it. But I think Joyce was a good company with these storytellers. Thank you for your